You know, usually when we talk about fixing something complicated, there's this expectation of like total precision.
Mm,
Like if you take your car to a mechanic, they plug a computer into the dashboard, right? And a code pops up and they just say, oh, it's the O2 sensor.
right, yeah. Very binary.
Exactly. You swap the part, the check engine light goes off, and you just drive away. It's a closed system. It's either broken or it's not broken.
And, I mean, it's incredibly comforting to think of our problems that way.
Oh, absolutely.
We're conditioned to look for the jagged white line on the X-ray because it gives us this illusion of total control over a system.
But then you step into the world of our own internal architecture, right? How we actually live our lives, how our minds and bodies interact. And suddenly that diagnostic computer is just, it's completely useless.
It really is.
We're looking at a landscape that is undeniably murky. You wake up feeling exhausted or overwhelmed or just, I don't know, entirely disconnected from your own life. And there's no simple jagged line to point at.
No, there isn't.
You can't just like swap out a bad mood like an O2 sensor.
Because unlike a car engine, or a bone fracture, you are dealing with a living, breathing, constantly adapting network.
Right.
So when you feel that generalized exhaustion or anxiety, it is rarely just a quote-unquote mind problem or just a body problem.
Yeah.
The entire network is experiencing a lag.
Which brings us to our mission for today. So, welcome to this deep dive. If you are joining us, you listening right now, you're stepping directly into what our source material calls the participant phase.
Yes.
The participant phase.
Based on this remarkably detailed manual for life architecture we've been exploring, our focus today is zeroing in on chapters 4 through 7. We were moving entirely out of the realm of pure theory. The goal today is to stop passively observing your life and start actively executing a brand new daily integration OS.
An entirely new operating system for how you exist in the world.
Right.
And this represents a massive pivot in how the material approaches human behavior, honestly.
Well, up until this point, it would be very easy for a reader to just kind of sit back and philosophize about their trauma or their goals.
Right, like playing armchair psychologist.
Exactly. But Chapter 7 introduces a foundational concept that just shatters that passive approach. It states that the separation between mind, body, and force is a convenient fiction.
Okay, wait. Let me make sure I am conceptualizing this correctly because this seems to be the linchpin for everything else we're going to cover today.
It is.
The prevailing cultural narrative treats the mind as, like, the CEO, right?
Yeah.
And the body is just this sort of clumsy company car it has to drive around. And the force or, the baseline animating energy of life is just some abstract mystical concept we can just totally ignore.
And that right there is the exact Cartesian dualism we've been trapped in for centuries.
Right, the whole I think, therefore I am thing.
Exactly. It elevates the software and completely dismisses the hardware and the power supply.
Yeah.
But the text argues they are not isolated islands. They're interconnected continents in a single ecosystem. You literally cannot have a thought without a corresponding chemical reaction in the body.
So it's like trying to run state-of-the-art software on a laptop with a shattered motherboard and a frayed power cord.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. You can have the most brilliant, calculating, high-level mind, the best software imaginable, but if your physical body, the hardware, is completely flooded with cortisol and inflammation, the software is going to glitch.
They have to glitch.
And if the power supply, that underlying life force, the autonomic nervous system's baseline vitality, if that's depleted, the whole machine just shuts down.
And that analogy holds up perfectly under neurobiological scrutiny.
Yeah.
The brightest mental insight you have, like maybe a profound realization you reach in therapy,
Yeah.
or a brilliant strategic plan for your business, it means absolutely nothing if your nervous system is too dysregulated to allow your body to execute it.
Right. Because, I think we've all had that moment of perfect clarity at like 2:00 a.m. where we say, tomorrow everything changes.
Oh, absolutely. The 2.0 a.m. motivation.
Yes. I am going to wake up, go to the gym, write 10 pages, and be a completely new person. The software has written a beautiful program, but then 7 a.m. hits, the alarm goes off, and the hardware simply refuses to boot up. The body just says, no, we are exhausted, we are staying in bed.
Yeah. And conversely, your body can be sending the most urgent, clear signals, like chronic tension in your shoulders, a knot in your stomach, really shallow breathing.
Right.
But that physical data goes entirely unprocessed because the mind stubbornly dismisses it as a mere inconvenience.
It just overrides the hardware warning lights.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what we are exploring today are the specific mechanical protocols to force these three elements to communicate in real time.
Okay, I want to get straight into the mechanics of this because the source material doesn't just offer sweeping platitudes, which I love.
No, it's very practical.
It provides hyper-specific micro-tools, and it starts with the absolute smallest levers you can pull to shift the entire system. And the first one is called the Ripple Journal. Now, I have to admit, my immediate reaction to seeing the word journal was a bit of an eye roll.
That's fair.
Because I've tried standard brain dump journaling, and frankly, I usually just end up writing myself into a deeper panic by cataloging everything that is wrong with my life.
Right, and your reaction is incredibly common. And it actually highlights exactly why traditional journaling often fails as a regulatory tool.
Really?
Yeah. A standard brain dump is often just a space to vent. Neurologically speaking, if you sit down and just pour out your anxieties onto a page for 20 minutes, you are essentially firing and wiring those specific neural pathways of stress.
Oh, wow. So you aren't processing the anxiety.
No, you're practicing it.
You are building a stronger highway for the panic to travel on.
Precisely. The Ripple Journal is entirely different. It functions as a forensic diagnostic tool.
Forensic. I like that.
Right, because instead of chronicling your entire day or, every emotion you feel, you isolate a single specific thought and you track its ripple through your system. You are acting as a detective looking at the cognitive chain reaction.
Okay, let's trace the anatomy of one of these ripples because the example provided in the text is just painfully relatable.
It really is.
It starts with the initial pebble dropping into the pond, a morning thought. You open your eyes, and the very first cognitive event is the thought, I am totally overwhelmed.
So that is the genesis point. The Ripple Journal then asks you to track the immediate behavioral consequence. Like, what action did that specific thought produce?
Well, in this scenario, the action is avoidance. Because the thought was, I'm overwhelmed. The action is staying in bed an extra 20 minutes, grabbing the phone, and mindlessly scrolling through social media to numb out, completely ignoring the big project due that week.
And then we move to the next concentric ring of the ripple,
Yeah.
the physical and emotional result. Because you took that action of avoidance, what happened to the hardware?
The result is a feeling of being stuck. The anxiety compounds. There's this heavy lethargic inertia settling into the body. So we have this clear, unbroken chain. The thought, I'm overwhelmed, creates the action of avoidance, which creates the physical state of heavy anxiety.
Exactly.
And under normal circumstances, I would just call that a bad Tuesday. But the Ripple Journal forces you to look at the math of it.
It makes the invisible visible. But the protocol doesn't stop at just observation. Once you map the chain reaction, you are required to intervene at the source.
Right, you can't just leave it there.
No, you have to introduce a cognitive reframe. You go back to that initial thought, I am totally overwhelmed, and you edit the software.
And the reframe suggested is radically simple. I will tackle one thing.
Just one.
That is the new thought. So you trace a new ripple, the new action based on that thought. You sit at the desk and complete one single task. You send the one scary email. And the new result. You generate a tiny bit of momentum. The heavy, lethargic feeling in the body actually starts to lift. The hardware responds to the new software command.
Right, and the underlying mechanism here is really about developing meta-awareness.
Okay.
Because if you execute this forensic tracking over a few weeks, you begin to see undeniable mathematical patterns in your own behavior.
Like you see the Matrix.
Yeah. You realize that the thought, I'm overwhelmed, is not an objective observation of reality. It is a trigger code that consistently launches an avoidance program in your nervous system.
Wow.
And once you see the code, you can intercept it before it executes.
You catch the pebble before it creates a tsunami.
Beautifully put, yes.
But let's look at a scenario where you didn't catch the pebble. You didn't have time to sit down with a journal. You are in the middle of a high-stakes meeting. You get an email that completely derails your project, and you can feel your heart rate spiking.
Right, a crisis moment.
The ripple is already a crashing wave.
Okay.
This is where the source material introduces the pause protocol.
The pause protocol is the ultimate emergency brake. It's designed for the exact moment the software starts glitching and begins sending erratic signals to the hardware.
It consists of 3 sequential questions you ask yourself in the heat of the moment. Question 1, what thought just entered my mind? Question 2, is this thought helping or hindering? And question 3, what is a more accurate or empowering narrative? Now, I have to be honest here. When I first read Empowering Narrative, my internal alarm bells went off.
I'm sure. It sounds a bit...
It sounds dangerously close to toxic positivity. Like if I am in a meeting and my project just lost its funding, I am not going to sit there and tell myself every failure is a beautiful stepping stone.
And you absolutely shouldn't.
Okay, good.
The text is very careful to distinguish this from forced positivity, because forced positivity is just a form of cognitive dissonance.
Right.
If the building is on fire and you try to tell yourself, oh, it's a wonderfully warm day, your nervous system knows you are lying.
Your body's like, nope, we are burning.
Exactly. The amygdala, your brain's threat detection center, will continue to pump adrenaline into your bloodstream because it knows the threat is real, regardless of the cheerful narrative you're trying to overlay on top of it.
So if it isn't about slapping a happy sticker on a disaster, what is the mechanism of the pause protocol?
It is about editing for truth and utility, rather than blind optimism. Notice the second question. Is this thought helping or hindering?
Right.
It entirely bypasses the agonizing philosophical debate over whether your catastrophic thought is technically true.
Oh, that is a crucial distinction. Because if the thought is, I might lose my job over this, that might actually be a statistically true possibility.
Yes, it might be.
But sitting there spinning out on that possibility while you still have to finish the meeting is actively hindering your ability to perform.
Exactly. You are caught in a predictive processing loop. The brain is simulating worst-case scenarios to prepare for them, but in doing so, it triggers the same physiological stress response as if the event were currently happening.
Because the brain doesn't know the difference.
Right. So when you ask, what is a more accurate or empowering narrative, you are intentionally shifting neurological activity away from the limbic system, the emotional reactive brain, and forcing blood flow back into the prefrontal cortex, which governs logic, planning, and executive function.
It's like you're manually overriding the autopilot when the plane is starting to nosedive.
Exactly.
You give the brain a specific analytical job to do evaluating accuracy, so it has to stop panicking to complete the task.
You are halting the spiral by forcing the brain to engage in objective truth-seeking rather than emotional pattern matching.
Which transitions us beautifully into the third micro tool, which I found completely fascinating because it actively physically bridges the mind and the body. The text calls them intention anchors.
Yes. This is a brilliant application of applied neuroplasticity and embodied cognition.
So the concept is pairing a deliberate mental intention with a highly specific physical cue. The source material gives a few practical examples, like you light a candle on your desk and you decide that this physical action triggers the mental state, I am present. Or you take 3 deep, controlled breaths, and that triggers I am calm. Or you stretch your arms wide and overhead, and that triggers I am open.
Right.
Now, I'll play the skeptic again.
Go for it.
Does this not border on the placebo effect? Am I really going to change a deeply anxious mindset just by putting my arms in the air?
I mean, it sounds suspiciously simple, right?
Yeah.
But the neuroscience of embodied cognition proves that our brains are constantly reading our physical posture to determine our emotional state.
Wait, really?
Oh, yeah. It is not a one-way street where the mind feels sad and so the body slumps. The feedback loop goes both ways.
Wow.
If you physically slump your shoulders and look at the floor, your brain registers that proprioceptive data and assumes you are defeated. And it will literally begin to synthesize and release depressant neurochemicals to match that physical posture.
Wait, so the brain is constantly scanning the body to figure out how it should be feeling?
Yes. It relies heavily on somatic markers. So when you intentionally pair a physical movement, like raising your arms overhead, with a cognitive state like openness, you are actively hacking that feedback loop.
Okay, that makes so much sense.
You're not just being symbolic. You are wiring a physical movement to a cognitive state. You're creating a remote control for your nervous system.
If you do it consistently when you actually are feeling okay, your body learns the association.
Exactly. Repetition is key.
So later, when you are in a defensive, closed-off state, your mind might be too clouded to reason its way out of it.
Right.
But you can just stretch your arms up and your hardware sends a mechanical signal up to the software saying, oh, hey, the physical posture of openness has been activated. We must be open now.
Yes. It proves the foundational premise we discussed at the beginning.
Yeah.
You can use the body to command the mind.
Okay, so we have these daily maintenance tools, the Ripple Journal to track the software bugs, the pause protocol to hit the emergency brake, and intention anchors to wire the hardware to the software?
The micro tool.
Right. But let's be realistic here. There are moments where you miss the ripple, the brake line snaps, and the whole system goes into a full meltdown.
Yes. the system crashes.
What do we do when the micro tools are just not enough?
That is when we move from daily maintenance to targeted crisis interventions.
Yeah.
And the manual categorizes these interventions beautifully based on which part of the system is failing fastest. So we have body first, mind first, and force first.
Let's start with the body first intervention because the text explicitly states this is the fastest way to intervene.
It is.
The scenario is this. Your mind is racing, you are catastrophizing, your thoughts are looping at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and you feel that buzzing electric anxiety in your chest.
We all know that feeling.
Yeah, you absolutely cannot think your way out of it. So why is the body the first line of defense here?
Because the body operates on a fundamentally faster circuit than the conscious mind.
Okay.
When you're in a state of high anxiety, your sympathetic nervous system has taken over. Your bloodstream is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. Your amygdala has essentially detected a lion in the room, and it has cut the power to your prefrontal cortex because logic is simply too slow for survival.
So when I am panicking about a deadline, my logic center is literally offline.
Literally offline.
Well, that explains why telling myself, it's just a deadline, it doesn't matter, never works. I am trying to talk to a part of my brain that has no power.
Exactly. Trying to use logic on a racing, flooded mind is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
Yeah.
You cannot reason with adrenaline. You have to metabolize it. You have to change the physical state of the hardware to force a system reboot.
And the manual gives very specific physical protocols for this. The first is a 60-second shakeout. You literally stand up and shake your limbs like a dog shaking off water or splashing freezing cold water on your face. I actually know the science behind the cold water one. It activates the mammalian dive reflex, right?
Yes, exactly.
It shocks the vagus nerve and mechanically forces your heart rate to drop.
Precisely. You are sending a massive, undeniable sensory input through the body that interrupts the neurological loop of anxiety.
So it's basically a physical override.
Yeah. When you do a 60-second shakeout, you're burning off the excess adrenaline that the fight-or-flight response generated. You're telling the ancient part of your brain, look, we are physically moving in a new way. The environment has changed. The threat has passed.
Okay, but let's flip the scenario entirely.
Sure.
The 60-second shakeout makes total sense if I'm buzzing with anxious energy. But what about the opposite state? What about when I am glued to the couch, I've been doom scrolling for 2 hours, and my limbs feel like lead weights?
Right.
I'm not buzzing. I am paralyzed. I can't do a shakeout because the inertia is just too heavy.
So what you're describing there is a dorsal vagal shutdown. It's a freeze response.
Yeah, freeze response. Okay.
The system is so overwhelmed, it is essentially played dead.
Yeah.
In this state, the body is too lethargic to initiate a body-first intervention.
So what do we do?
This is where you deploy the mind-first intervention, which the text calls the most precise tool. You have to use surgical cognitive precision to cut through the physical fog.
The specific technique outlined for this is fascinating to me. It involves identifying and naming the pattern out loud. For example, sitting there and saying verbally, aha, I am currently experiencing the rumination meme, or this is the overwhelm pattern.
Right.
Now, again, playing the skeptic, if I am physically exhausted, staring at the ceiling, feeling totally apathetic, how does simply naming the problem out loud actually help?
It seems counterintuitive.
It feels a bit like standing in a burning room and saying, I am currently on fire. It doesn't put out the fire.
It's a highly logical objection, but we have to look at the neuroanatomy of what happens when you speak a label out loud.
Okay.
When you were trapped in that frozen rumination state, your brain is likely caught in the default mode network, driven by the older, more primal structures of the limbic system. When you force yourself to engage your language centers and your higher-order observation skills to articulate a precise label, you are physically forcing blood flow out of the limbic system and back into the prefrontal cortex.
Oh, so it isn't just about the meaning of the words. It is about forcing a different part of the machinery to turn on.
Exactly. The act of specificity, applying a linguistic label to an abstract physical feeling, acts as a neurological circuit breaker.
Wow.
It shifts your position from being the victim of the feeling to being the observer of the feeling. That tiny cognitive spark of objectivity is often just enough to break the physical paralysis so you can finally stand up and move.
You use the mind as a scalpel to cut the net the body is trapped in.
That's exactly it.
So we have body first to burn off the anxious buzzing, and mind first to cut through the paralyzing fog. But this leads to the ultimate crisis scenario. What do you do when both the mind and the body are utterly overwhelmed?
Right.
When your thoughts are spiraling into catastrophe, Andy, your body is shaking with panic, and you can't access logic or control your movement.
That is total system failure. And that brings us to the force-first intervention. The text describes this as the most subtle, but arguably the most profound intervention.
We need to be very clear about terms here, because when the text talks about the force, it isn't talking about telekinesis or mystical auras.
No, definitely not Jedi stuff.
Right. It is talking about tapping into the deeper biological reality, the unseen animating energy, the autonomic intelligence that is always flowing through the system without your conscious effort.
It is the baseline intelligence of the living organism. It's the realization that your body knows how to keep you alive without your conscious mind micromanaging it.
The specific techniques for this are incredibly grounding. The first is the pulse point meditation. It takes 5 minutes. You just find your pulse on your wrist, your neck, or by placing your hand over your heart. And the instruction is the key. Don't try to change it.
Right. Just observe.
Don't try to slow it down. Just witness it. You are meant to realize in that moment that you aren't doing the beating. Your conscious mind isn't sitting there saying beat, beat, beat. You are being held and sustained by a larger automatic system.
And the psychological shift there is massive.
Yeah.
When you're in a total crisis, your ego, the doer, is in overdrive, convinced that if it doesn't control everything, fix everything, and figure everything out right this second, you will literally die.
Yeah.
The pulse point meditation shifts you entirely out of the panicked state of the doer and moves you into the calm, secure state of the witness.
It's like realizing you are a passenger on a very sturdy autonomous train rather than feeling like you have to run along the tracks carrying the train cars yourself.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
The second technique is the breath observation. 3 minutes. Again, pure observation. You don't do deep belly breathing. You don't try to force a box breathing rhythm. You just watch it. Is it shallow? Is it choppy? The text says the breath is breathing you.
And the third technique is the sensation inventory, taking 7 minutes to simply scan the body for the presence of this vitality.
Like, where is the heat? Where is there tingling?
Exactly. And again, there's absolutely no agenda to fix the anxiety or calm the heat. You're just noticing the life force flowing through the hardware.
It's just being present with it.
Yes, it is a profound act of radical acceptance that instantly lowers the neurological threat level.
I honestly feel my own shoulders dropping just talking through the mechanics of it.
It's powerful stuff.
But the text makes a critical pivot here. It doesn't stop at the boundaries of our own skin. It expands the operating system outward into environmental integration.
Right.
Because as much as we like to think we are independent operators, we don't exist in a vacuum.
No, we exist in a context. And your environment is constantly interacting with your hardware and your software. It can either constantly trigger your fragmentation or support your integration.
The first practical step here is the sensory audit. You systematically check the data inputs your system is receiving. Sight. Is your workspace incredibly cluttered, triggering a low-level visual anxiety response every time you look up?
Oh, that's a huge one for us.
Like, are you trying to do deep work in chaotic noise? Or conversely, is the total silence making you understimulated? Smell. Can you introduce lavender to downregulate the system or citrus to upregulate it? You are literally auditing the environment.
And then there's the location shift.
Oh, yeah.
We severely underestimate how deeply our spatial geography affects our cognitive processing. If you are anxious at your desk, move to the floor. If you are scattered inside, physically walk outside.
Right.
Changing the physical geometry of your space forces the brain to calculate new spatial dimensions, which fundamentally changes your cognitive perspective.
But the most potent environmental factor isn't the lighting or the smell of the room, it's the people. The text delves into the social nervous system.
This cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
We are deeply biologically social creatures. We have mirror neurons that are specifically designed to read and mimic the emotional states of the people around us. Our nervous systems literally co-regulate. You can do all the pulse point meditations and 60-second shakeouts in the world, but if you sit down next to someone who is vibrating with chaotic, unmanaged anxiety,
your nervous system will pick up that frequency and unconsciously start to match it to build rapport.
Exactly. It's incredibly contagious.
So it's highly contagious.
Very. The text makes it clear. To maintain this new operating system, You must systematically limit your exposure to chaotic, dysregulated people and intentionally spend time with grounded people.
That makes sense.
Even a brief 5-minute conversation with someone who is truly centered can act as a tuning fork for your own nervous system, bringing your chaotic frequency back into harmony.
A tuning fork for the nervous system. That is brilliant. But, as we talk about all these high-level concepts, integration, the witness state, tuning frequencies, it is so easy for the ego to hijack this vocabulary.
Yeah.
Like, we use it to actually justify our own chaos. To illustrate how easily our surface self can co-opt this process, I have to bring up the absolutely hilarious Act 4 anecdote from the sources.
The grocery store incident. I was hoping we'd get to this. It perfectly captures the trap of spiritual bypassing.
It is so funny and so revealing. So the scenario is this. The traveler, who has been deeply immersed in studying all these profound teachings about the mind, body, and force, finds themselves in the middle of a modern grocery store. And they decide they're going to practice the high-level spiritual concept of non-attachment in the cereal aisle.
A very perilous place to test one's enlightenment, if you ask me.
Truly. The paradox of choice is just overwhelming. So the traveler is standing there, staring at the wall of sugar, and suddenly has this grand, absurd epiphany.
Oh, boy.
The traveler screams out loud right there in the aisle, "I've achieved non-attachment to choice, so I'm choosing everything."
Yeah.
And they just start frantically grabbing boxes and throwing them in the cart.
Yeah.
Cheerios, Frosted Flakes, Raisin Bran, Lucky Charms, Cocoa Puffs.
Just absolute chaos.
They are just hoarding cereal in the name of elevated consciousness.
And meanwhile,
Yeah.
their internal surface self, the ego, the part of us concerned with social conditioning and survival in the tribe, is absolutely panicking.
Yes. The surface self is screaming internally, "This is humiliating. People are staring. We look insane."
Right.
And the deeper witness self is just sitting back in the theater of the mind, observing the entire meltdown, going, fascinating approach to the cereal problem.
It is a brilliant comedic illustration of a very real danger.
It really is.
It shows what happens when we use abstract psychological concepts to justify chaotic, dysregulated behavior. The traveler wasn't integrated. They were just using the sophisticated vocabulary of integration to mask a manic, overwhelmed state triggered by the hyper-stimulating environment of the grocery store.
It's the ultimate trap. I'm not having a panic attack. I'm just radically accepting all the cereal.
Exactly.
It is a reminder that true integration isn't about grand, sweeping, eccentric gestures. It is about quiet, functional, regulated alignment. Which brings us to the final and most crucial section of our deep dive. Now that we have the micro tools and the crisis interventions, and we know how to audit our environment, how do we make this regulated alignment our default state?
Right. How do we build a habit?
Yeah, how do we build an architecture that prevents the fires from starting in the first place?
We have to move from a reactive posture to a proactive posture.
Yeah.
We institute the sequential protocol and the daily integration OS.
Let's unpack the sequential protocol first. The text calls this the 15 to 20-minute deep reset.
Yes.
This is designed for those moments when you aren't in a full 5-alarm crisis, but you feel the system drifting. You feel the fog rolling in, and you need to bring all 3 elements back online. And the text is adamant. The order in which you do this matters entirely. You cannot jump straight to fixing the mind.
Because if the hardware is unstable, the software won't update.
Exactly. So phase 1 is the body reset. 5 minutes. It is highly prescriptive. 2 minutes of movement shaking, walking, doing jumping jacks. Then 2 minutes of breath regulation to signal the vagus nerve. And finally, 1 minute of absolute stillness. Why the stillness after the movement?
Well, the movement metabolizes the latent stress hormones and the breath regulation slows the heart. But the 1 minute of absolute stillness is what allows the autonomic nervous system to register the new baseline.
Oh, I see.
It is the physiological all-clear signal. You have now stabilized the hardware. The threat signals are quiet. Now and only now can you safely move to phase 2.
Okay, so phase 2 is mind clarification. 5 minutes. With a calm body, you ask yourself, what is the dominant thought right now?
Right.
You find a helpful, accurate reframe for it, just like in the Ripple Journal, and you set a clear, single intention for the next hour. You are programming the software on a clean hard drive.
And then phase 3, force attunement. 5 minutes, hand on the heart, reconnecting with the pulse point meditation, recognizing that vast unseen intelligence coordinating the billions of cellular processes happening inside you. You plug the clean hardware and the updated software back into the power supply.
And it culminates in phase 4, integrated action. 5 minutes. From this aligned, synced up state, you ask yourself what one small action honors all three: the mind, the body, and the force.
Right.
And then you execute it immediately. You don't put it on a to-do list, you do it.
This 20-minute sequence is powerful because it touches every single node in the network. It leaves no part of the system behind.
It's so comprehensive.
But the real structural integrity of this new life architecture comes from the Daily Integration OS, or TDIS.
This is the scaffolding for your entire existence, and it begins with the morning triad. 15 minutes. The text frames this as an absolute, non-negotiable daily ritual.
And the biological reasoning is totally sound. The way you transition from sleep to wakefulness dictates the baseline frequency of your nervous system for the next 16 hours.
Wow.
If you start your day fragmented, like if you wake up, immediately grab your phone, read the news, and check work emails while still lying in bed, you are instantly flooding your system with external demands and cortisol.
Right.
You will spend the rest of the day fighting an uphill battle against that initial dysregulation.
So the morning triad intervenes immediately. Minutes 0 to 5, wake the hardware. Before you touch a screen, you physically stretch. You drink a massive glass of water to hydrate the brain and the tissues. Minutes 5 to 10. Calibrate the software. And this is key. You set a quality or an intention for the day, not a task list.
Right. That's crucial.
You don't think, I need to finish the quarterly report. You dictate the tone. Today, I choose to embody patience. Or, today, I am approaching my work with curiosity.
You're setting the emotional and cognitive parameters for how you will engage with whatever tasks arise, rather than letting the tasks dictate your emotion.
And finally, minutes 10 to 15. Attune to force, hand on heart, feeling the pulse, anchoring into the baseline vitality.
Yes.
Now, I can hear the objections already. People listening are saying, I have kids, I have a commute, I do not have 15 free minutes in the morning.
Of course. It's the most common pushback.
But let's look at the actual math of that excuse. If you say you don't have 15 minutes to integrate your system, you need to look very closely at how much time you bleed out later in the day due to mental fog, scrolling out of exhaustion, or having to redo work because you were too scattered to do it right the first time.
It is a false economy. 15 minutes of integration in the morning is not an expensive time. It's an investment that yields hours of clear, focused, high-capacity execution later.
Yeah.
It's basically the most profitable return on investment you can make for your nervous system.
But the operating system doesn't just abandon you after breakfast. A good system requires ongoing diagnostics. That brings us to the midday sync. The text recommends setting 3 recurring alarms on your phone throughout the day. When they go off, no matter what email you were writing or what spreadsheet you were looking at, you pause.
Stop.
You take 3 deep breaths. You ask yourself a simple diagnostic question. How are my mind, body, and force doing in this exact moment? And then you make one micro-adjustment. You fix your hunched posture. You take a sip of water. You actively drop a tense, ruminating thought.
I like to think of this as steering a ship across the ocean. A captain doesn't wait until the ship is 1,000 miles off course to wildly spin the wheel back.
Right.
The captain makes constant, imperceptible micro-adjustments to the rudder to account for the wind and the current. That is what the midday sync does for your nervous system. It prevents the massive drift.
And it all closes out with the evening review. A brief 5-minute journal reflection before bed. You simply note, where did I feel integrated today? Where did I feel fragmented or hijacked? And based on that data, what is one single adjustment I can make for tomorrow?
And the genius of that evening data collection is that it feeds directly into the weekly pattern recognition section.
Ah, right.
Once a week, you spend 20 minutes zooming out and reviewing your daily notes. You start to see the macro trends. Well, you might realize, oh, I am perfectly integrated every morning, but I consistently lose my grounding by 3 p.m. on Thursdays. Or every time I have a meeting with this specific client, my hardware goes into fight or flight.
So you're building profound meta-awareness. You transition from being a passive victim of your circumstances, someone to whom life simply happens, into an active, conscious architect of how you process reality.
You are finally in the driver's seat of the whole vehicle.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We have dismantled the illusion of separation between mind, body, and force. We are armed with the Ripple Journal to track our cognitive cascades. We have the pause protocol to hit the emergency brake. We understand how to use intention anchors. We know exactly how to deploy body first, mind first, and force first interventions when the system crashes. And we have the architecture of the Daily Integration OS to keep it all running smoothly. I feel like we have handed over the keys to a completely upgraded human experience.
It is an incredibly robust toolkit.
Huh.
But, if we look closely at the deeper implications of this text, there's a final, rather provocative reality we have to address before we go.
Okay, lay it on me.
We've spent this entire time talking about internal integration. But what happens when you take this finely tuned, integrated system out into the messy, chaotic world?
The world rarely cooperates with our internal peace. What does the text say about this collision?
It addresses the reality of the relational field. When you diligently execute this daily integration OS, your nervous system literally begins to broadcast an entirely new frequency.
Right.
You walk into rooms radiating a grounded presence, calm and clarity. But here is the warning. When you bring genuine, deep integration into a room, it acts as a very stark mirror. It inevitably confronts other people's fragmentation.
Wow, so your regulated calm actually acts as a spotlight on their chaotic dysregulation.
Precisely. And people react to that mirror in two very different ways. Some people, those who are seeking grounding themselves, will be naturally drawn to your calm. They'll feel an innate sense of safety around your regulated nervous system.
Right.
But others will be deeply, unconsciously unsettled by it.
Because it forces them to feel their own discomfort.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And without even realizing what they are doing, they will instinctively try to pull you back down into their drama, their gossip, and their chaotic urgency.
Wow.
They will test your boundaries simply because that state of high alert fragmentation is the frequency where they feel safe and familiar.
That is wild to think about. It is like the old analogy of crabs in a bucket pulling each other down but playing out on the level of autonomic nervous system regulation.
It's a biological drive for homeostasis within the group. So the final challenge we must leave the listener with today is this. As you step into the world as a fully integrated, conscious participant equipped with this new operating system, are you prepared for how the world might actively push back against your calm? And do you have the conviction to hold your center when it does?
That is a phenomenal question to chew on. And frankly, it's the best possible reason to make sure you keep those micro tools handy.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep exploration today. Remember, the goal of all this architecture isn't achieving a flawless state of perfection. The goal is active, conscious participation.
Perfectly said.
You don't need to wait for a clear, jagged line on an X-ray to start fixing the system. You have the OS now. Stay curious, keep tracking those ripples, and go execute your new operating system. We'll see you next time.